Good morning, beautiful people. Good afternoon, good evening. It doesn't matter what time it is. Just know today is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. Why? Because God is good. He's good all the time. Duh. Okay. Now, hold your horses. We getting into the next motherfucking chapter because I know I'll be wasting time, man. I'll be moving a little slow. We're getting these videos out there, but trust me, I'm trying, y'all. I'm trying. It's a hobby. You know what I'm saying? It's not a job. And I just do it whenever I'm in the, in the mood and have the time for it, because you'll see some content, but I'm also doing renovations on my house with my wife. We're working on the house, and majority of the work we're doing by ourselves, and we're doing almost an entire floor. So it's taking us some time, especially, because life just be out here lifing. But y'all know we got to get into the motherfucking book right here, okay? We on chapter 7, baby. Blood at the Root. Let me make sure it's in frame. Blood at the Root, okay? Blood at the Root by Patrick Phillips, okay? Blood at the Root, a racial cleansing in America. Don't forget racial, okay? Because you got some people that want to make it seem like race is not a factor that is considered. It is, okay? It may not apply to you, but it exists, okay? We on chapter 7, y'all. And I just want to let y'all know, baby, if y'all have not motherfucking caught up with the previous readings, get your butt into that description. Motherfucking, there's chapter 1 all the way through 6 already in there. Catch yourself up. Come on. There's no need for you to be behind the rest of us with all that motherfucking content listed in there. I even got some content in the description that, that I feel that you should be privy to, because it'll increase your motherfucking knowledge arsenal. Ain't nothing wrong with that, So make sure you get into that. Catch up, man. Catch up. Also, make sure, if you have not, that you go over to the Antithetical Antagonist motherfucking channel, also on YouTube, that is ran by me, because that's my podcast, baby. And I'm going to motherfucking be posting videos up there. Now I will be getting on a better schedule, because I know I have not been doing my best with motherfucking disseminating this information out in a timely fashion. I'll get my life together. Be patient with me. However, make sure y'all get on to the Antithetical Antagonist. You can find all types of content over there. I got several videos in the motherfucking queue waiting to be posted, in regards to interviews, motherfucking just solo discussions with myself. On top of the fact that I just want y'all to motherfucking be knowledgeable, baby, because the Bible says it, for his people perish for lack of knowledge. We don't need to be out here dying due to lack of knowledge with all this knowledge out here. We just got to do our due diligence and get into it. Also, if you haven't done so, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hey, do all of them, do one or the other. It don't really matter. Just make sure you motherfucking get up to date with the content that I'm posting, as well as share with other people, because we are trying to increase knowledge out here, baby. We don't want folks dying out here because of ignorance. All right. So we about to get into chapter 7. Bam. Chapter 7 of Blood at the Root, a racial cleansing in America by Patrick motherfucking Phillips. Okay. Patrick motherfucking Phillips. Chapter 7, the majesty of the law. Let's get into this, baby. When news of Mae Crow's death reached Atlanta, murder was added to the true bill against Ernest Knox. The trials of Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel, both two black people that were accused of committing some lawlessness, and they ain't had squat to do with nothing. Okay, they just happen to be black. And y'all know how it is during these times. The tensions be high. Even in 2024, niggas tensions be high. Niggas motherfucking life suck, so they want to blame the next person, right? Instead of going to the actual motherfucking cause, right? We want to blame the same people that look like we, going through the same situations as we, instead of coming for the niggas that is benefiting off of our struggles. Ain't nothing new under the sun. Just like back then, You have motherfucking racist white people wreaking havoc on black people because they were so upset about the stuff that exists in their lives, their inability to access different resources, and they want to blame black people and foreigners. It's always existed. When the Italians got here, when the Irish people got here, when the Quakers got here, there's always been this fear of the other, and there's always been this blame of the other, the immigrants, the outsider. There's this fear, there's this anxiety, and it's like they are the root of causes. They are the root of the causes to the problems that I'm having. And it's just not true. The root of the causes of the problems you're having is sin, in addition to the fact that you have a tiny percentage of people motherfucking controlling the majority of wealth and resources. Those are your enemies, okay? Not your brothers and sisters in the same struggle as you. Let's continue. Anyways. The trials of Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel for the rape and murder of Mae Crow, of Jane Daniel as accomplice to rape and murder, and of Tony Howell for the rape of Ellen Grice were set to begin on Thursday, October 3rd at the Forsyth County Courthouse. The U.S. Supreme Court would eventually decide that it was unconstitutional to try African Americans in any place where they were systematically excluded from juries, which violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, I think this is interesting, and I'm gonna put a little placeholder here because we're gonna come back to this. But I think it's interesting that it said that the U.S. Supreme Court would eventually decide that it was unconstitutional to try African Americans in any place where they were systematically excluded from juries, which violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. This currently happens now. When you go to court and you go to trial, your jury will consist of, especially as a racial minority, your jury will consist of people that do not come from the demographics as you, right? I've been arrested quite a few times. However, I've actually been processed through the courts, at least, I will say 1.5. One fell off in the earlier stages. One of my court proceedings actually dragged all the way to the trial, where they actually, did their whole voir dire, Venire process when it's come to selecting the jury and how they motherfucking decide who will be the jurors and whatnot. And baby, I'll tell you, there was only one black individual that was sitting on my on the jury, and it was some old black man, right? In addition to the fact that this old black man didn't even come out of the locale that I'm around, right? So we're under the impression by the Constitution that we would be facing, a jury consisting of our fellow peers. Now, with me being a black individual who resides in the city of Rochester, which is what white supremacy would deem urban, which is just this placard saying this is where all the Negroes live, okay? These people, you would think that my jury would consist of more people who look like me, more people who come from, they reside where I reside. But no, majority of those who stood jury, the jurors that made up the jury, these people were predominantly white, and they were outside of the city of Rochester. These people came from the motherfucking towns, the villages, the suburbs, rural parts of New York to come sit and make a decision on I'm supposed to be judged by my peers. These people aren't my peers. There's nobody up there that's anywhere near my age group. I'm more than confident that the youngest person up there was probably about 40. And at the time, I was 26, 27. So it's crazy how the U.S. has passed legislation that pretty much prohibits, these unconstitutional acts, yet we still see it today. It still happens. And then when you look at it, the cities are disproportionately arrested and convicted. And with the conviction, especially as a felon, you lose privileges to sit jury duty. So when black people are disproportionately being arrested and convicted with felonies, how can I expect to be judged by my peers when they are motherfucking exempt from the process? old white grandmas and granddads, old black grandmas and granddads, mother freaking pending old white black Latino grandmas and granddads aren't my peers, bruh. And there's a drastic cultural difference where a lot of old people are annoyed by people in my age group. So they will find me guilty without even looking at anything pertaining to the actual case. All these extra legal factors that come into play, and these niggas and their implicit biases that come into play. And next thing you know, I'm hemmed up because this person don't understand my culture, because they don't come from my culture. But let's continue. I just want to repeat that line. The U.S. Supreme Court would eventually decide it was unconstitutional to try African Americans in any place where they were systematically excluded from juries, which violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. This same amendment protects immigrants. So for you people who think that immigrants aren't protected and they don't have the same rights according to you, I implore you to read the 14th Amendment and see that when you come into any jurisdiction, you are automatically under their care. You literally fall under that jurisdiction. So even if you are an immigrant, you ain't got no citizenship here. If you get dragged to the court systems, if you interact with any of our government, actors, you are covered by the Constitution according to the 14th Amendment because you fall under their jurisdiction. So because you fall under their jurisdiction, the same rights that I have as a citizen, native-born citizen, these immigrants, these undocumented immigrants also have in the United States. This is why immigration is not a criminal matter where people say it's illegal, it's criminally illegal. It's not, baby. It's not. Okay. Just like it has not been made legal for these manufacturing companies to be dumping poisons into the Earth's atmosphere, and the people that live, reside close to them are dying and getting tumors and sick and stuff. It's not explicitly stated in any state's penal law. Now, where you can motherfucking seek some retribution, seek some motherfucking recompense is in civil court. But in civil court, according to the Constitution, you are supposed to be awarded effective counsel if you cannot afford it. As an indigent, aka a poor person, you are not exempt of all these constitutional rights just because you're poor. So it's to be provided to you. In the civil realm, that doesn't apply. You want to sue somebody civilly, you got to get a lawyer that'll take on your case and exhaust their funds, or you have to initiate it yourself and exhaust your own funds. Courts can be expensive, especially with these fees. The average person barely can pay they month-to-month bills, let alone paying anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars just to initiate, a civil proceeding in court. So this is why I continue to tell people, just like evictions, immigration, residing in a country without documentation, it's not criminally illegal. It's not illegal. It's not. Because what's considered illegal would be labeled in penal law, under criminal law. Civil is just like, you can hold people accountable for their moral standards. You had a duty to ensure that no harm came unto me. Harm came unto me. You were the cause. Here's my proof. And you can win in civil court. Civil court, you're not, just because you poor, they don't give a damn. You poor, then you ain't getting no lawsuit because ain't no lawyer going to be provided to you. You want to motherfucking sue these people? Well, this ain't criminal court where the government exhausts government funds to motherfucking prosecute you. In civil court, they not using government funds. They'll use yours or your lawyer. And if you ain't got no lawyer, you ain't got no funds, then it ain't happening. But let's continue. Okay, let's continue because I'm only on the first page and we about 10 minutes in. But let's go. Okay. Shut up, Tara. Just open your mouth for the reading. Let's go. All right. But that decision in 1935 was still more than 2 decades in the future. And so in 1912, the fate of the Grice and Crow prisoners would be decided by all white juries in Cumming. On the same town square where Rob Edwards' bullet-riddled corpse had been left on public display as a silent warning to local blacks. I hate that people refer to black people as blacks. Like, nigga, since when the freak did we just get reduced to a color? We no longer black people. It's just blacks. Ugh. With the accused rapist headed back into the heart of the race troubles, Judge Newt Morris drove to Atlanta on Friday, September 27th, to personally communicate his concerns to the governor. His request that Joseph Mackey Brown impose martial law for the duration of the trials and once again send state troops to prevent a lynching. Martial law is basically when they're like, okay, we're in a state of emergency, so basically all constitutional rights get thrown out. That happened here in 1964, the race riot between white police officers and black people. Martial law came into place. They talk about it's a state of emergency. They had everybody and their mama, from county sheriff, Monroe County Sheriff, to New York State troopers, to motherfucking Rochester police, to even outside factors, local police, you know what I'm saying? The surrounding cities and whatnot. Strange activities. But let's continue. Anyways. Brown responded by declaring Forsyth to be in a state of insurrection. For the second time in a month, and ordered 3 companies of the Georgia National Guard to escort the prisoners north. With military protection in place, Morris turned his attention to a second vexing problem, finding men bold enough or fool enough to mount a legal defense. It was, Morris understood, a difficult thing to ask of any white man. Most attorneys in the state knew from experience that defending black clients could lead at best to a quick defeat and at worst to a visit from the same kind of men who had stalked and killed Rob Edwards. You see that? The attorneys didn't even want to take on these cases because they know that automatically they're going to lose. We see that now. A lot of attorneys don't want to take on cases unless it's a damn near solidified win. Lazy as freak, man. Okay? On top of the fact that they scary, because we see that now. Your child end up sexually assaulted or abused by school staff. You try to sue them. Same thing with the police. A lot of these lawyers will refrain from getting involved in those matters because they don't want to ruffle feathers, especially local attorneys, because you have to take into consideration the relationships of these courts that you aren't privy to, where local attorneys don't want to take on controversial cases, especially in a residence that they or in a locale that they reside in, because or they work in on a regular basis, because now it opens door for a toxic work environment. And anybody, I implore you to research into the relationships amongst court actors. It's a very faulty dynamic that exists there, especially with judges. Judges usurp authority over court employees as if they were God. I'm telling you, the God complex in a lot of these motherfreaking professional people, these professional career holding folks, it's asinine. But let's continue. All right. According to the Atlanta Georgian, on October 1st, just 2 days before the trials were to begin, Morris called 8 lawyers before the bench, looked each man sternly in the eye, and asked him to do his public duty. In response, each one offered an excuse for not defending the Negroes. 4 of them had a ready answer to the judge's request. They could not serve because they had already been retained to assist the prosecution. These 4 were experienced litigators from Marietta, eager to claim a share of the attention and gratitude that would come to whoever won a conviction. They were led by Solicitor General J.P. Brooke, a friend of Charlie Harris's and a partner in the Atlanta Northeastern Railroad. Railroad. You got a partner in Atlanta Railroad. You got money. Okay. Also on the prosecution team, because railroads aren't government ran. Also, the prosecution team was Eugene Herbert Clay, the mayor of Marietta, son of U.S. Senator Alexander Clay, and at 31, a rising political star. After a glance at the list of prosecuting attorneys, many people in Cumming must have nodded and chuckled, seeing his reputation and his railroad threatened by all the negative attention. See, now these people coming after his money. This is why niggas be folding, because they don't want to mess up that money. What's that scripture? What profit a man to gain the world, to sell his whole soul? Actually, Give me a second. So that's the line right there. That's the line. Okay, and I'm going to just read it to y'all off of the motherfucking screen because I had to pull it up. I know the gist, but I want y'all to know what the scripture is in its entirety. And it's, for what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his soul? You got a lot of people handing over their soul for temporary things. I mean, even the Bible says in Revelations that these things that we go out of our way to accumulate, to create, to hoard, these things will be motherfucking destroyed and ate away. I'm telling you, at some point, even the vehicles, the houses that you have, they will be ate away. Rust is a fungi created by God that destroy metals. Okay, it's a little crazy to me for you to want to gain some profit and lose your soul for something that is so temporary, and then you lose your soul for an eternity. Gain something temporary, lose your soul for eternity. Yeah, that's not for me. That's not for me. Anyways, let's continue. Charlie Harris had called in an army of powerful friends and nearly all his political favorites. See, he really, I give it to him. Dude trying to at least get them a defense team, the black folk. Okay. It's looking a little bleak, but he trying. By contrast, the defense team was made up of a small town lawyer from Cumming in nearby Canton who were appointed by Morris despite their own objections. Amaziah Fisher, Isaac Grant, and John Collins were far more experienced with land deeds, contract disputes, and rental agreements than they were with a sensational rape and murder trial, which was now being covered by the newspaper all over the South. Leading the defense was another Marietta man, Fred Morris, no relation to Newt Morris, as they think. That sounds like when Negroes be like, oh, it's another set. Nah, bro. Ain't no another set. We all related. Literally all of us. All of us come from the same man. And the Bible said that Abraham will be the father of several generations. If you are alive, you will come from Abraham. Okay, we all related. There ain't no other set. Just because the name's spelled a little differently, that's still your cousin. That's kinfolk, okay? You got to remember, niggas was navigating through times where people didn't know how to spell. You had to tell people, you didn't know how to read, right? So you had to tell people what your name is. And people was like, oh, your last name Green? Okay. It depends on who you went to. Today, your last name is Green, Green. The next time you go before somebody, now your name is Greene. Okay? Y'all still the same people. Anyways, let's continue. Leader of the defense was another Marietta man, Fred Morris, no relation to Newt Morris, who was known to be a close confidant of many of his opponents on the prosecution. Two of the attorneys opposing one another, J.P. and Howard Brooke, were father and son. Father and son opposing one another. The latter, at 21, was barely older than the two teenagers he was assigned to defend. Having divided the lawyers into two camps, one stocked with talent, power, and experience, the other with law students and overmatched small-town attorneys, Judge Morris prepared to open the fall session of the Blue Ridge Circuit Court with the ambitious Eugene Herbert Clay preening for all of the photographers and journalists in town, and with the 5 defenders reluctantly accepting their no-win assignment, everything was now in place except for the defendants themselves. And so at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, October 2nd, Lieutenant Rucker McCarty of the Georgia National Guard appeared at the Fulton Tower and signed forms acknowledging receipt of 6 prisoners. The 4 defendants, Ernest Knox, Oscar Daniel, and Jane Daniel in the Crow case, and Tony Howell in the Grice case, as well as 2 material witnesses, Ed Collins and Isaiah Perkle. Collins was an Oscarville farmer said to have been with Rob Edwards and Oscar Daniel on the day of the Mae Crow's murder, and Perkle had been swept up in the earliest waves of arrests back in September, along with his friend Tony Howell. These are all black people, obviously. It is likely that the other 5 black men arrested during the hysteria were simply released from the tower, but the papers make no mention of their fates. They could have been murdered. Who knows? A photo taken that morning shows McCarty's troops marching through the streets of Atlanta toward Terminal Station with Jane Daniel and her brother, Oscar, walking at the center of the military formation. For the past month, papers had described Oscar Daniel as the barefooted, fiendish looking type. But what readers saw in the photograph was a teenage boy dwarfed by the armed militiamen marching all around him. As hundreds of Atlantans, I would like to add, when you are in a situation like that, perception is reality for a lot of people with flawed, you know what I'm saying, brain power, okay? You have people who look at things on the face, they take things at face value and assume that what they see is what it is. They believe, well, you couldn't be innocent because if you was, you wouldn't be swarmed by all these, policemen. And a lot of people would perceive Tony Howell and the rest of these gentlemen as guilty based solely on visuals. It's crazy. It even coincides with modern day convictions where people who are held in pretrial detention, they're more likely to be convicted because they're coming from jail and they're being presented in front of juries, a juror, or they come before a jury that perceives them in their jail garment. And they're like, you had to have done it. Look at you. You look guilty, even though you just was held in pretrial detention. Interesting. As hundreds of Atlantans gawked at the procession, Jane clutched the long folds of her dress with one hand and walked beside her brother, their wrists handcuffed together over Oscar's shoulder. In his pork pie hat and white shirt was the slim figure of Tony Howell, who had not been outside the Atlanta jail for nearly a month. Now, let me show you this little picture. My bad, y'all. So you can see the faces. But this is the one that you're talking about. He looks like a child, which he was. At the time, he was about 16. And he's surrounded by all these armed militiamen. At Terminal Station, the prisoners boarded a special train, rode a little more than an hour north into the foothills, then got off 13 miles east of Cumming in the little whistle-stop town of Beaufort. The group that disembarked numbered more than 200, counting 167 military escorts, the prisoners themselves, members of the press, and lawyers participating in the trial. The military commander, Major I.T. Catron, had appointed a personal guard of 6 men who were to surround the prisoners at all times and defend them from potential lynchers and assassins. With a Southern Railway locomotive steaming and hissing in the background, the troops spilling out onto the tiny platform all around him, Catron raised his arm and ordered a brief stop for lunch. As the midday sun beat down and as the soldiers were fed by the kitchen staff of a local hotel, the prisoners got a brief moment of rest, as they too ate a hot meal, then waited on a stack of railroad ties at the very center of traveling circus. Just before Catron ordered them to rise and begin the day's long march, a photographer extended the black leather bellows of a camera and squinted into the viewfinder. When the shutter clicked, he captured the most indelible image of Forsyth explosions, and it was soon churning off the presses of the Atlanta Constitution. I'll show you that picture as well. Oop, my bad, y'all. This is one right here. And the little caption underneath says, the Forsyth prisoners at Beaufort, Georgia, October 2nd, 1912, left to right, Jane Daniels, Oscar Daniel, Tony Howell, Ed Collins, Isaiah Perkle, and Ernest Knox. As you see, all these people are black, except for the motherfucking people that's hemming them up, dragging them to court and stuff. The lady over here, she's kinfolk to Oscar, Jane Daniels. That afternoon, the troops walked through miles of pine forest and river bottoms. That afternoon, the troops walked through miles of pine forest and river bottom, watched by hundreds of curious locals who came out of their houses eager to get a look at the troops and their notorious prisoners. Having crossed the Chattahoochee and entered Forsyth, the regiment reached the outskirts of town just as the sun was going down. Catron called the march to a halt, And as his command echoed down the line, the militiamen shrugged off their knapsacks and bedrolls, pitched their white canvas pup tents, and established a camp perimeter on land that had been volunteered, Catron was told by the local sheriff. It was widely reported that the mountaineers of North Georgia were once again flooding into coming for the trials, many of them armed and prepared to make trouble. So when a group of civilians appeared out of the darkness at the edge of the camp, a nervous sentry called, "Who goes there?" It was surprised to find before him, with their hands raised, not overall-clad farmers, but a group of gentlemen wearing the spectacles and fine wool suits of attorneys at law. "Tonight," a reporter wrote, "Judge Morris, Sheriff Reed, Fred Morris of Marietta, John Collins, and Howell Brooke of Canton came to the camp from Cumming. As soon as they were recognized, the men asked to speak privately with the 6 prisoners. There are no reports of exactly why such a visit was made, what was discussed, or how long it lasted, but the appearance of Judge Morris and defense attorney Fred Morris at the campfire meeting raises a number of questions. Corruption, and people act like here in 2024 it just came to a halt. No, baby. Anyways, allons continue. There was nothing unusual, of course, about a judge and an attorney meeting with defendants on the eve of a trial. But this particular judge and this particular attorney are now known to have participated in one of the most brazen acts of mob violence in American history. The 1915 kidnapping and murder of Leo Frank, a Jewish man who was convicted of the rape and murder of a young white girl named Mary Fagan. Judge Newton Morris, former Governor Joseph Mackey Brown, prosecutor Eugene Herbert Clay, and defense attorney Fred Morris were all involved. Newt Morris was, in fact, the mastermind of Frank's abduction. From the state penitentiary, but he pretended to have arrived just minutes after the lynching and persuaded journalists, including a reporter for the New York Times, that it was he who had prevented the crowd from burning Frank's body. These jokers got away with mother freaking just lying. From that sheriff sitting here talking about it was him that protected the black men that were being held in the jail as the lynch mob came, when it was actually his subordinate, Sheriff Loomis. Now you got this guy, right along with several other attorneys and motherfucking a judge, breaking out a man, kidnapping him and murdering him. And then this nigga trying to lie, talking about he had just got there. Man. Talking about he had prevented the crowd from burning. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Jesus help us, Lord. Just 3 years after the trials at Forsyth, Morris would manage to both lynch a man and become famous for having stood up to a mob. Harold Willingham, a local lawyer who knew him well, said that Morris was powerful and widely respected during his lifetime. But in private, many people in Marietta knew a different man. Now that sounds about right, because I done came across several raggedy motherfucking judges and lawyers, man. And they ain't the only ones out here that's raggedy, because the Bible says ain't none good but the Father. The Bible says there's none good but the Father. I'm saying ain't none good but the Father. Let's continue. Harold Willingham, a local lawyer who knew him well, said that Morris was powerful and widely respected during his lifetime. But in private, many people in Marietta knew him as a different man. He was, said Willingham, a 14-carat son of a bitch with spare parts. Jane, Oscar, and Ernest could not have known that the judge hearing their cases would soon preside over a lynching in the woods outside Marietta. But they must have realized just how unlikely it was that they would ever receive justice from the all-white juries of Forsyth. Now, although they are not aware that the judge overseeing their case presided over a lynching, but the thing that I find interesting is that people try to say that absolute immunity and all these other protections that have been put into place to protect judges were to just solidify their positions and give them, the ability and the autonomy to utilize their discretion without feeling the need to damper down or, you know what I'm saying, like dilute their discretion, their decision making. And so it's been awarded to judges absolute immunity, which basically means that they are not to be held accountable, especially civilly, nor and a lot of times criminally, for actions that they commit while sitting in their seats, doing their job, performing their jobs. And it's not unlikely and it's not uncommon, even here in 2024, where we are just about every case that exists has some type of judge presiding them over it, or an attorney on it that has some immoral, unethical, and motherfreaking just deliberately corrupt tendencies. But I digress. Let's continue because I'm trying to finish this. I gotta go eat. I'm hungry. I ain't had breakfast yet. Anyways, even if their lives were spared, when Judge Morris handed down sentences, everyone knew that the farmers flooding into town brought with them an unspoken threat that any outcome other than a death penalty would be remedied by the will of the people. As one coming man put it, in the lead up to the trials, the editors of the Gainesville Times expressed the view of most whites, which was that the Knox and Daniel trials could and should lead to only one verdict. Little time will be required, a reporter wrote, and of course the brutes will be found guilty. It's either find them guilty or have the white people wreak havoc against the people in power. And this is why the people in power usually found them guilty, or they found them guilty because they was a part of these motherfreaking, you know what I'm saying, wayward, froward individuals. Jesus Christ. Anyways, let's continue. Little time will be required, a reporter wrote, and of course the brutes will be found guilty. Now all of a sudden they brutes. Y'all don't even know what the freak happened, but they brutes and they'll be found guilty. Gee. Given the near impossibility of acquittal, the only hope left for the prisoners was to cooperate with Morris and hope that at least some of them might still escape alive. Jane Daniel, Ed Collins, Isaiah Perkle, and Tony Howell were all in grave danger the minute they crossed back over the county line. But what they must have wondered, if the convictions of Ernest Knox and Oscar Daniel could be made to satisfy the white people of Forsyth. What if somehow 2 hangings could be enough? Not them over here trying to compromise on them. Hang 2 instead of all, nigga, no. The men ain't got squat to do with none of that. At a nod for Major Catron, Judge Morris passed through a military checkpoint in Bill Reed's pasture. Bill Reed is the raggedy cop that lied about defending these gentlemen and did not. He was at home hiding. Then he and the attorneys followed a soldier past rows of glowing campfires until they reached the little cluster of tents where Jane Daniel and the other prisoners were trying and no doubt failing to get some rest. After a brief fireside conversation with Jane and the accused men, Morris and the lawyers appeared once more at the checkpoint and were escorted back to Cumming by Sheriff Reed. What sort of bargain they had come to offer and what they'd ask in return was not reported. Jesus, Lord have mercy. But the next day's evening papers shocked readers with news that the sister of one of the accused men had suddenly and supposedly of her own accord turned state's evidence and agreed to testify for the prosecution. Get it, girl. Because you always have some black people that defend others, but this is why culturally a lot of us tend to mind our business. There's too many of us that get hemmed up and murdered, and held and made an example of for defending what's right. For reasons no one could or would explain, the night had wrought a sudden change in young Jane Daniel. Okay, let's see what's about to happen. After breakfast on the morning of Thursday, October 3rd, the soldiers struck their tents and readied the prisoners for the last mile of the march. Through the dusty streets of Cumming, the little town, according to one observer, was crowded as never before in its history, as people all over North Georgia was drawn by the excitement. Surrounded by military guards as they walked up Castleberry Road, the prisoners faced the jeers and howls of mountaineers who had been gathering weapons. It's always some motherfucking rural redneck coming out the woodworks to want to wreak havoc in a town, they ain't got squat to do with them. According to one reporter, in making threats that the accused Negroes will not be permitted to reach the jail. To protect them, the governor had ordered out an overwhelming show of military force and armed the guardsmen to the teeth. In addition to the Springfield carbines slung over their shoulders, the Georgian reported, the soldiers of the 5th Regiment were ordered to discard the usual revolver and equip themselves with the new Army Derringer pistols, which automatically discharges 11 heavy bullets and could be reloaded in a second. Governor Brown's declaration of martial law had even concluded with a steely warning to people crowding into town for the trials. Now, however you perceive the Second Amendment, some people perceive the Second Amendment as that we have the right to bear arms of any and every firearm that has been possessed by the military. And I think it's crazy how in some instances, like a lot of people, they come after these automatic weapons and these semi-automatic weapons and such, and they paint them as such these brutally heinous weapons, right? They're just so corruptible and they're out here just wreaking havoc, the weapons. But then it's okay for the motherfucking militiamen, the government, to arm themselves with motherfucking Derringer pistols, which they claim to discharge 11 heavy bullets and can be reloaded in a second. But then niggas complain about niggas walking around with an AR-15. Lord have mercy. I'm just saying, if the Constitution Amendment states that we are not obligated to house militiamen, the government can't force us, then what protections, what measures can we utilize when y'all come and try to impose upon us? You're trying to strip us of the very weapons that we have the rights to. It just don't make no sense. Yet y'all have access to them to use it against us. I mean, here in New York State, around the same time, 2020, we had a Daniel Prude protest where Daniel Prude was murdered by the police. He's a black man, and he was murdered by the police, and the police officers were white. And his murder happened shortly before George Floyd, but Daniel Prude, his situation went quiet for a while because the government was going out of their way to try to cover it up. They didn't want all that public, attention, especially because the Daniel Prude or the George Floyd was pending. And then you had all the previous, black victim, white police officers aspect. So they was trying to cover all that stuff up. Big protests erupted, and you had the police shooting people with expired tear gas, shooting them rubber bullets in their joints, like full blown taking out knees. I'm one of them that got hit in both of my knees. Pin a lawsuit. I'll put that out there. A lady got busted in the face, beamed her whole junk, like her whole nose. This was just jacked, man. Jacked. And the only thing we really had was you had a few people hiding behind like makeshift shields, which looked like they was made out of like sledding equipment. Motherfucker, you had a few people that had on bulletproof vests, but we didn't really have no protections. And then shortly after, before 2022 rolled around, New York State passed a law criminalizing the possession of motherfucking bulletproof vests. So now it's been made illegal to possess a bulletproof vest. Why can we not use them when the police have no problem shooting us? Why can't we protect ourselves? That's the question I want to ask. Why? You can shoot us up, but we can't protect ourselves. Technically we can, but they want to make you feel that you can't. Okay? Protect yourself at all means. Like the Bible says, they can destroy your body, but they can't destroy your soul. Follow peace with all men if possible. It ain't possible. Defend yourself. Let's continue. Governor Brown's declaration of martial law had even concluded with a steely warning to people crowding into the town for the trials. While it is the desire of the authorities to exercise the powers of martial law mildly, it must not be supposed that they will not be vigorously and firmly enforced. When Judge Morris was asked about the potential for trouble while walking towards the courthouse, he paused. just long enough to remind the reporter that the troops were authorized to fire at will. Any disorder, he said, will have serious, if not fatal, consequences. Although they should be protected the people, this is a mindset that they carry over in every aspect, even when they ain't protecting nobody. But let's continue. Sheriff Reed has summoned 84 men for jury duty. So when Morris banged his gavel and opened State of Georgia versus Ernest Knox, jury selection was the first order of business. By 11 a.m., 56 talesmen had been questioned and 12 jurors agreed upon. 5 were struck, so this is the Venire voir dire process. They're selecting the jury, utilizing questioning, and they're trying to see who would be qualified or disqualified. You have so many challenges. I believe it's called exemplary challenges. Don't quote me on that one. I will motherfreaking fact check that and you will see it motherfreaking, place right here. But they only get so many challenges. So if one attorney is not filling the jury, they can challenge them to get them removed, but they only get so many. La la la. An Atlanta reporter with a gift for understatement said that their minds were not clearly unbiased as between the prosecution and defense. The judge impaneled a jury of 12 white men, 11 of them employed as farmers and the 12th as a watchman at the local mill. The same thing they do now. Majority of your jurors be white and they not from your locale. But then I digress. Let's continue. Jesus. Hey. An Atlanta reporter with a gift of understatement said that their minds were not clearly unbiased as between the prosecution and defense. The judge impaneled a jury of 12 white men, 11 of them employed as farmers, and the 12th as a watchman at the local mill. Among these, otherwise unremarkable, people of the county were 2 jurors, E.S. Garrett and William Hammond, who would join the Sawney Clavern of the Ku Klux Klan in the early 1920s. Oh my goodness. So among these jurors were 2 who were part of the Sawney Clavern, the Ku Klux Klan in the early 1920s. Guarding the door was Sheriff Reed, another liar, the liar. I was protecting these people the whole time he was hiding at home, leaving it to Loomis, who would stand beside them as a Klansman. I forgot to mention, Sheriff Reed is also a Klansman. Yeah. Dressed in his own white robe and hood. Lord have mercy. This nigga didn't even try to hide it. What? Let's read that again. Oh my God. Guarding the door was Sheriff Reed, who would stand beside them as a Klansman, dressed in his own white robe and hood. Seated among the lawyers were 2 of Leo Frank's future lynchers, Fred Morris and Howell Brooke. Oh my goodness. And at the very center of the courtroom, directing the whole affair, was Judge Newton A. Morris, who was also a part of lynching that Jewish man. Corruption. No doubt, conscious of all the reporters in attendance, the judge called the murmuring spectators to order, then announced in a booming voice that he would expedite the trial in every manner possible, and at the same time ensure that the proceedings were fair and impartial. Yeah, motherfucking right. The purpose of the entire process, Morris said, with a grave and imperious glance around the room, was to uphold the majesty of the law. Ugh, liar. If Morris' speech gave even a glimmer of hope to Ernest Knox, it must have faded when the prosecution called the day's first witness, Mr. L.A. Bud Crow, Mae's father, was listed as the official prosecutor of the case. Lord have mercy. That ain't a conflict of interest? The girl daddy listed as the official prosecutor of the case, the one that was supposedly murdered, and they're blaming these black men. She was brutally raped and murdered. I'm going to read that again. Mae's father was listed as the official prosecutor of the case, and he struck a pitiful figure as he sat, hat in hand, and spoke of his beloved daughter, of the morning he'd first looked upon her bloody body, of the 2 weeks his wife, Azzie, had spent praying at Mae's bedside and of her recent death and burial. At a funeral attended by many people present in that courtroom, Bud Crow was compelled to repeat the pathetic story of his daughter's shameful handling, a reporter wrote, and the recital stirred the depths of even the most hardened onlookers. The two witnesses who followed, they just appealing to emotion, pushing narratives by invoking emotions. It's like, bro, these people ain't had nothing to do with it. So just painting a very vivid, picture doesn't change the fact that y'all trying to convict some men that ain't got squat to do with it. The two witnesses who followed Dr. George Bryce and Dr. John Hockenhole made the prosecution's strategy clear. They would ask witness after witness to describe Mae injuries and stoke the same sense of horror and outrage that had led to the lynching of Rob Edwards, evoking emotions. The image of Mae Crow's broken, defiled body was enough. They knew to make a conviction of Ernest Knox all but inevitable. Lord have mercy. After the dead girl's father brought many in the crowd to tears, and after the doctors shocked listeners with their accounts of Mae's fractured skull and lacerated throat, the witness was Ed Collins, a black farmer from Oscarville, who was among the prisoners brought north from the Fulton Tower. There was no telling what Collins' wife Julia knew or didn't know during the trial or during the time her husband was jailed. But if she had dared to venture into coming for the trial, it would have been the first time she laid eyes on him since mid-September. For at least 2 days during their separation, Collins was mistakenly identified by reporters as the man whose body had hung from a telephone pole on Cummings Square. Damn, so they had this lady traumatized, thinking her husband was dead, and the whole time he was alive. When Collins rose and walked toward the witness stand, the reason for the mistake was clear to everyone. Just like Big Rob Edwards, Ed Collins was a tall and powerfully built young black man. So y'all just be out here, all black people look alike. Just in case y'all want to see what Collins looked like. This is Collins. Collins was called not by the defense but by the prosecution because the story he told implicated Knox and Daniel through circumstantial evidence. Lord have mercy. He said that on the day of Mae Crow's disappearance, Knox and Edwards came to his house in Oscarville and stayed until about 10 p.m. Most importantly for the state's case, Collins testified that they borrowed a lantern and said they were going in the direction of the Crow home, which is about 2 miles away. That doesn't mean she did it, or they did it. Thus began the prosecution's attempt to prove allegations that had been racing from storefront to storefront all month. After Ernest Knox met Mae Crow on Durand Road and beat her over the head with a rock, the story went, he dragged Crow's unconscious body into the woods, then went to find Rod Edwards and his cousins Jane and Oscar and led them back to the scene. See, this reminds me of times now, snitching. The snitching thing, where it's not even people snitching, it's just people saying anything to save themselves, which I understand. You're under duress. Your thought process at this point, survival. So you will throw niggas under the bus, make up the stories, go along with whatever story was implanted in your mind to save your own skin. And that's exactly what it seemed like Ed Collins is doing, because that man don't know for a fact that them people did anything. Just because you walked in the area don't mean squat. One time, I was getting my poultry license so I can raise chickens. And in Rochester, New York, the requirement to raise chickens, you have to go through the city of Rochester's police and have them confirm that you have a chicken coop and all this bullcrap, right? And so I scheduled an appointment with these turds to come to my house so they can look at my chicken coop so I can get my poultry license so I could raise chickens. I had got to my house probably maybe 3 minutes after they did. It wasn't even that long, because I feel like as soon as I was pulling up, I saw them leaving. And so I'm like, what the freak? I go and check my cameras and I see these niggas done backed all up into my yard. They looking all in my yard. Mind you, They're government officials. So according to the Fourth Amendment, it prohibits searches and seizures without a warrant. You see what I'm saying? Improbable cause. There was no probable cause. We had a meeting. So I called to report them. They motherfucking people talking about, but y'all had a meeting. Just because we had a meeting don't mean that they can violate my Fourth Amendment rights, searching my motherfucking property. So then I'm like, I got them on camera. He's like, well, how do you know they even did that? I got them on camera. The police do, they call it PSS. This is the people that you report the police to. This is why I don't report the police to the police. Because they don't do squat about it. It's how can you expect niggas to reprimand themselves? Anyway, this nigga hit me with the, yeah, but just because you see it on the camera doesn't mean that it actually happened, because it doesn't provide context. All you see is what's happening. You don't know. For all we know, they could have heard someone yelling for help and then they went back there to see what was going on. I'm like, well, my cameras have sound. There's no one yelling for help. If they heard help, it would be on my cameras. Then he goes and say, well, maybe they seen something that you weren't privy to through your cameras, because the cameras don't give the full story. These niggas don't put in all this effort to dispel motherfucking hemming up people that they deem criminals with evidence, even though a lot of that stuff be circumstantial. They don't motherfucking go out of the way. But when I'm motherfucking reporting these niggas for violating my constitutional right, this nigga PSS went out of their way. Went out of their way to defend something they had knew nothing about. I say that to say, this supports my notion. If the police can sit here and say, just because you got a camera showing the police doing exactly what you said they're doing, does not mean that the context is being provided in that motherfucking video footage as well. And so when you got a person sitting here saying, well, yeah, that person was walking in that direction, just because they was walking in that direction does not mean that they did what you were accusing them of. They could have turned off and did something else. Niggas could have went into the woods and started fishing. You wouldn't know. You weren't there. Anyways, let's continue. So we're going to run it back. Thus began the prosecution's attempt to prove allegations that have been racing from storefront to storefront all month. After Ernest Knox met Mae Crow on Durand Road and beat her over the head with a rock, the story went, he dragged Crow's unconscious body into the woods, then went to find Rob Edwards and his cousins, Jane and Oscar, and led them back to the scene. There, all three men were said to have spent the night repeatedly raping Crow. This narrative justified the prosecution of Daniel as well as Knox, explained the arrest of Ed Collins and Jane Daniel. Jane didn't rape him, though. He ain't said nothing about Jane. She's just standing there watching it. Like, during this time, black people doing something like this just seems crazy. Especially when you got no two white people patrolling. And then, this is during the time where lynching was just so prevalent. Or, excuse me, it was so pervasive. Ugh, goodness gracious. This narrative justified the prosecution of Daniel as well as Knox, explained the rest of Ed Collins and Jane Daniel, and most importantly, redefined the lynching of Rob Edwards as a just punishment for a heinous crime. As the prosecutor turned his back to Ed Collins, he told the jury that Knox, Daniel, and Edwards had borrowed Collins' lantern, not because they had stayed later than intended, not because it was dark, and not because they had a long walk home. Instead, the jury heard it was because a beautiful white girl was lying out there unconscious in the wood, and they needed a light to find her. Ooh, oh my goodness. White women ain't like these weirdos. Y'all really put way too much like oomph into white beauty. Ain't a human beautiful enough that somebody gonna do something like this, especially not no white woman. Come on, like this whole this desperation of desire for white women amongst black men that is portrayed through racist ideas is just that. It's racist idea. It's hogwash. It's vomit. God, Jesus, niggas are really, y'all really think niggas out here will risk their whole life. Whole life. Oh, Jesus. For veg, period. Like, come. Just saying. Ain't no motherfucking genitalia out here worthy enough for niggas to get lynched. Black people knew what it was hitting for. You can't even Emmett Till was murdered for supposedly whistling at a white woman. You can't even look at these heifers. Walking past white people during these times, black people had to look away, look down. But you about to just be out here raping? Black people just, it's like, niggas, you don't even have an opportunity to commit a crime, because when you don't even commit a crime, there's the assumption you did it. Shut up, Tara. Just keep going. Keep reading. Just don't make no sense to me. Badging. It's badge. And then it's a white lady at it. It's like, come on, Jesus. Come on, Jesus. Oh, shut up, Tara. This is my flesh talking. God forgive me. Anyways. If anyone in the courtroom had doubts, the prosecution's next witness presented what seemed like irrefutable evidence. A confession that came from Ernest Knox's own lips. Whatever else he said on the witness stand, it's clear that Marvin Bell left out the fact that Knox had confessed while in the midst of a mock lynching. Bell reiterated what was now the widely accepted story that on Sunday, September 8th, Ernest Knox had met Mae Crow while she was walking on the road between her parents and her aunt's house, bashed in her skull in the throes of a sexual rage, left her unconscious body in the woods, then returned with Edwards and his cousins, Jane and Oscar, whom they still ain't even say what the freak Jane supposedly did while she was there. She was just out here watching. Like, what was she? The first mother freaking Clyde Davis? Where you just out here got people, you watching people have sex and you getting off on it. Is that what they trying to push here with Jane? Along by her brother, her cousin, and her husband to hold the lantern while the three men took turns raping Crow. Bro, this is the logic of time back then. By the time Marvin Bell sat down, most whites in the gallery were nodding in agreement with a patently unconvincing story, which the next day's Constitution deemed one of the most revolting rape cases in the annals of the state. As Ernest Knox sat stone still beside his team of reluctant defense attorneys, Newt Morris rose from the bench, tapped his gavel, and announced a midday adjournment. Baby. I love my white people. I love y'all with the love of God. Even though you don't deserve it, I love you with the love of God. But let me tell you this, baby. Yo, what you got ain't good enough for people to want to risk their lives for it. I don't know why y'all convinced yourselves that black people have this like burning desire to be entrenched with y'all sexually. It don't exist, baby. Okay? Okay? I mean, if anybody seems to be a little obsessed with the other, especially sexually, history have shown us that it's actually the other way around. It's this obsession of white people with black people, especially when it comes to our reproductive systems. Legislation was passed that allowed white men to have sexual access to everyone, making it illegal for everyone to mix with one another except them. But we're the ones obsessed with your genitals. You don't see black people making laws that mother freaking permits them solely to have sex with everybody. You don't see it. You don't. Jesus. Not too long ago, we seen mother freaking one of them Paul brothers, the nigga that fought Mike Tyson, with this big brown dildo shaking it. We see the obsession that y'all have with black phallus, black male phallus. You know what I'm saying? We see the obsession that y'all have with black women's butts, the boobs. I mean, look at Sarah Bartman. This woman was put on display in a museum, butt-a naked, for over 100 years in France. Until Nelson Mandela in the 1970s, mother freaking went to get her taken down and put her to rest. I'm just saying, you gotta stop pushing fallacies, okay? If anybody obsessed with the next person's reproductive system, History has shown that it's white people. When Emmett Till was murdered, they decocked him. Took his whole penis. It's actually a very common tactic performed by lynchers. Messing with people's genitalia. Mary Turner in this book was a black woman who was murdered because her husband was murdered. And she would voice that her husband was murdered by racist white people. And she sought justice. And you know what the racists did to her? Hung her upside down by her ankles while she was about 8 months pregnant. Doused her in motherfreaking gasoline. Set that woman on fire. Brutalized her body and then carved her belly. Watch the that baby that was sitting in her belly for about 8 months. Hit the ground. The baby starts crying. And them same racist white people stomp the baby out. Now, I'm not saying this to piss people off and with white people in general. It's just we pointing out historical facts. If anybody seems to be obsessed with anybody sexually, it's you white people. You psychosis white people, you know what I'm saying? The ones that y'all be letting Satan do and run rawshod in y'all lives. Yes, it'll be y'all wreaking havoc on people. It's y'all. Now, you can take what you've been presented, come up with whatever understanding you want. You don't know my heart, okay? But one thing I do know, the stuff that's mentioned in this motherfreaking book is stuff that we are dealing with today. And although I am biracial, my my maternal grandmother was a full-blown white woman, making my mom biracial with her black daddy. And my black daddy made me this very black-looking biracial person. It doesn't change the fact that this stuff that is listed in this motherfreaking book affects me to this day. There's even parallel with a lot of the things that occurs in times today as things that occurred during the times that this book was written on, which was the early 1900s, late 1800s. When people look at me and they perceive whatever they perceive, majority of the time they look at me and they perceive black woman. And they treat me as such. All of the biases that are associated with them, whether they're aware of it or not, they treat me as such. And so when I come across stuff like this, like majority of us, you know, it's like, damn. It caused some tension. It caused sadness, you know. It causes a lot of emotions to roll through. But one thing I try to do is remind myself, like the Bible says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, rulers of darkness, okay? A lot of the stuff that we see happening out here, these heinous, egregious, motherfreaking malicious actions that are being brought out by humans, it's being orchestrated by Satan. And little do these jokers know, they are being controlled and manipulated by Satan and all his minions. So, even though I don't like a lot of the stuff that has been imposed upon black people at the hands of white folk, I don't hate y'all. Those that are white, I don't hate you. And I have to remind myself every day, that none of us is good but the Father. And ye without sin cast the first stone. I'm not going to act like heinous things have not taken place in the past. But one thing I will do is strive to be like Jesus, because my end goal is to get into heaven and to worship alongside my brothers and sisters, worshiping the good Lord. And I can't get there holding animosity, hate, ill will, or anything of the sort towards any person. So I won't sit here and lie to you and say that I'm 100% put together right now, but I'm still in my healing process. And at some point, I'm going to get there. Because like I said, just like all black people aren't criminals, all white people ain't out here lynching people. And even though we have ancestors that contributed to some very dark, disgusting, froward things, Jesus said it in his word that he's not going to hold the latter generations accountable for the actions of their forefathers. And so I thank God for not holding me accountable for stuff that has been said and done by my ancestors. Because I know they done some jacked up stuff. All have sinned and fell short of God's glory. I'm not going to hold other people accountable for the actions of their ancestors. Now, what I will do is hold you accountable for the actions that I perceive you to disseminate. Okay. Fair enough? I love y'all. God bless and peace. If you want people to think otherwise of you more positively, then give them more positive experiences.